Welcome the Lord's chosen. Be careful who you try to bury. They might be a seed. They thought they could silence you, control you, outnumber you, or laugh you into a corner. But here's a fact they didn't calculate. Seeds grow in the dark, and chosen ones are the most dangerous when underestimated. It's funny how the same people who called you crazy are now checking your page in silence, hoping you won't notice their energy trembling while they watch you rise. They said you were too quiet, too soft, too spiritual, too different, and now those are the exact reasons they're running from you. Because you became the storm they never saw coming. Today we're unpacking why no one has ever been so dangerously unstoppable like you, and why your haters are literally sprinting in the spirit and in the physical, dodging your presence like roaches when the light comes on. Stay locked in, because you're about to understand why your mere existence is enough to dismantle entire plots against your destiny, and why you don't even have to fight when God already made you the proof. Number one, you're dangerous because you healed what they were using to control you. They thought they could keep you small because they knew exactly where to poke your wounds to get a reaction. They used your insecurities against you, made you feel guilty for wanting more, and kept reminding you of your past to control your future. They loved it when you were stuck in cycles of overthinking, doubting your worth, questioning your voice. It gave them power every time you apologized for taking up space, for having needs, for simply existing. But you did something they never saw coming. You healed. You sat with yourself in silence when it hurt the most, and faced the fears you were taught to avoid. You stopped ignoring the betrayal, the abandonment, the rejection, and you stopped running from the child in you who only wanted love. You allowed yourself to grieve the life you thought you would have, and you let go of the people you were trying to keep, who never valued you. You started seeing your patterns, your people-pleasing, your fear of being disliked, and you pulled it out from the root. And that's when it happened. The control they had over you evaporated. Now they can no longer trigger you with the same old tactics, because you're no longer seeking validation in places that drained you. You don't need to explain your boundaries, and you don't need to be understood to feel at peace. They can call you names, try to guilt you, try to shame you. But the part of you that once cared about their opinion doesn't exist anymore. They're standing there with empty hands, looking confused because you're not reacting, and that terrifies them. They didn't expect your healing to be this powerful. They didn't expect you to rise up with clear eyes, a steady heart, and a spirit that's unbothered. You healed what they were using to control you, and that has made you more dangerous than any revenge ever could. Your wholeness is your weapon, and it's the one thing they can't take away from you. Number two, your detachment is the weapon they can't predict. They can't handle you because you stopped letting your emotions control your moves. They thought they knew exactly how to get under your skin, how to push you to respond so they could say, "See, I knew you were crazy." They thrived on your reactions, your outbursts, your tears, and your explanations, because every emotional reaction you gave was another piece of control they collected. But now you move in detachment, and that has become the weapon they can't predict. Your detachment doesn't mean you don't feel. It means you choose where your energy goes. You see their games, but you don't join in. You hear their gossip, but you don't clear your name. You notice the shade they throw, but you don't clap back to prove your worth. You've realized that silence is not weakness. It's power in its purest form. They can't measure you anymore because you don't dance to the noise they create. They can't pull you into chaos because you've stopped seeing every battle as yours to fight. Now they are confused because how do you manipulate someone who doesn't need your approval? How do you provoke someone who has nothing to prove? They're throwing darts, but you're not there to catch them. They're setting traps, but you're too busy focusing on your purpose to step into them. Your peace is unbothered and your focus is laser sharp, and that makes you unpredictable. And unpredictable people are dangerous because nobody knows what they're going to do next. They counted on your reactions to feel superior, to keep you feeling small, to keep you explaining, to keep you stuck in cycles of defending your name. But now your detachment has exposed the truth. They needed your energy to stay relevant, and without it, they're powerless. You've become untouchable not because you fight harder, but because you simply don't fight where you don't need to. Your detachment is the storm they never prepared for, and it's the very thing that's making your haters run. Number three, You became ungovernable when you stopped seeking their approval. They were banking on your fear of being alone to keep you in check. They thought you would keep shrinking yourself, keep saying yes when you meant no, keep overextending just to be accepted. They thought your need for approval would keep you bending over backwards, begging for crumbs of validation. It worked for a while because you didn't want to lose people, you didn't want to be talked about, and you didn't want to be seen as difficult. But then you stopped caring about being liked, and everything changed. You stopped ignoring the discomfort in your spirit when you were around people who drained you. You stopped silencing your truth just to keep the peace in rooms that never offered you real peace in the first place. You realized that belonging at the cost of your voice was too expensive, and you started choosing yourself even when it was uncomfortable. You stopped seeking permission to exist in your full self, and you stopped apologizing for having standards, boundaries, and a voice that shakes rooms. You became ungovernable the moment you stopped needing their approval to feel valid. Now their opinions don't hold the same weight they once did, and that's why they're unsettled around you. They can't dangle acceptance over your head anymore because you're not afraid to walk away. They can't guilt trip you with silence, with passive aggression, or with threats of abandonment because you've learned that your solitude is better than forced company. They're uncomfortable because you stopped asking, "Is it okay if I grow?" and started growing anyway. You stopped shrinking to fit in and started expanding, even if it meant outgrowing the people you once thought you needed. Your confidence doesn't need their agreement, and your spirit doesn't need their applause. You became a force because you stopped negotiating your worth with people who didn't even know their own. And now they can't control you because you don't need them to approve your becoming. That's the freedom they can't manipulate. And it's why you're more dangerous now than you've ever been. Number 4, you dismantled the illusions they used to feel superior. They built their sense of superiority on your silence, your uncertainty, and your willingness to play small so they could feel big. They needed you to believe that they were above you, wiser than you, more powerful, more anointed, more connected, more everything. They wanted you to see them as the standard, so you would keep reaching for their approval, keep seeking their guidance, keep bowing your spirit just to get a nod from them. Their power was never real. It was only ever borrowed from your belief that they had something you didn't. Then you stopped pretending you didn't know who you were. You stopped downplaying your gifts to make others comfortable. And you stopped watering down your voice to keep their ego intact. You stood up in your truth, even if your voice trembled, even if they rolled their eyes, even if they tried to shame you into sitting back down. And when you did, the illusion shattered. They couldn't keep up the act anymore because your confidence exposed the insecurity behind their superiority. Your authenticity made their performance obvious. You didn't need to argue with them to dismantle it. You didn't need to prove yourself, debate your worth, or clap back. You just lived. You kept growing, kept showing up, kept shining, kept walking in purpose without waiting for their permission. Your life itself became the evidence that their power was never power. It was manipulation and image management, and it terrified them. You didn't have to expose them. Your freedom did that for you. Your joy did that for you. Your peace did that for you. Every time you chose to be yourself without shame, every time you chose obedience to God over their opinions, every time you refused to bend your identity to be liked, you broke their false hierarchy. Now they can no longer stand on your back to feel tall because you are no longer down there, and that's why your presence alone has become a threat they can't control. Number 5, they fear you because you're not performing for their applause anymore. They were used to you jumping at every compliment, working overtime just to get a pat on the back, craving their praise to feel seen. They knew exactly how to throw you off with a cold look, a silent treatment, or a backhanded comment, just to keep you dancing for their approval. It was easy for them to control you when you measured your worth by how much they liked you, when their praise felt like oxygen, and when their criticism felt like suffocation. But something shifted inside you. You got tired of feeling like a puppet for other people's moods and opinions. You stopped performing, stopped trying to earn love, stopped trying to earn belonging. You realized that the praise they used to hook you was just another form of control, a currency to buy your silence and compliance. You saw how quickly their applause turned to shade the moment you chose yourself, and you finally understood that their approval was never real love, it was a leash. Now, your quiet confidence is louder than any performance you could have ever given them. You move without making announcements, you grow without seeking validation, you thrive without needing their applause, and you heal without broadcasting every step. You don't get high off their praise, and you don't shrink under their criticism, and that has made you untouchable. They fear you now because they can't predict your next move. They can't manipulate your emotions with fake praise, can't shut you down with side comments, can't steer your decisions with guilt or approval withdrawal. Your worth no longer swings based on their opinions, and your energy is no longer wasted on trying to be liked by people who never valued you genuinely. They are afraid because you have become free, and a free person is dangerous to those who survive on control. Your quiet confidence is proof that you've taken back your power, and they know they can't lure you back into the cage you've already outgrown. Number 6, you're dangerous because you don't need to belong to their circles to thrive. They thought you would always need them, that you would always fight for a seat at their table, laughing at jokes that weren't funny, agreeing with opinions you didn't respect, pretending to be small just to feel included. They believed their circles were the only place you could find opportunity, love, or validation, so they dangled it over your head like bait, making you feel grateful for scraps of acceptance, but you grew. You learned that forced belonging is not belonging at all. You saw how much energy you wasted trying to fit in with people who were never meant to understand you, people who secretly envied your light but wanted you close so they could keep you dim. You saw how they tried to gatekeep connections, resources, and influence, hoping it would keep you dependent on them so they could keep feeling superior. Then you stopped trying to sit at tables where your spirit felt suffocated. You walked away, even if it meant walking alone, because you finally realized you were never meant to blend in when you were called to stand out. You stopped begging to be included in rooms you had the power to outgrow, and you stopped chasing spaces that couldn't hold your true self. And you built your own table, a table rooted in authenticity, purpose, and faith. A table where your gifts are not tolerated but celebrated, where your voice doesn't need to be edited for approval, where your calling is not a threat but an asset. While they were busy trying to keep you out, you created something they can't duplicate, and now your absence is loud. They're scrambling for relevance because your presence brought value they can't replace. You didn't just leave quietly. You left with your favor, your anointing, your creativity, your integrity, and your spiritual authority. You took back your energy, your peace, and your joy, and now they're realizing you were never the one who needed them. They were the ones who needed you to feel important. That's why you're dangerous now. Because you're thriving without their circles, and you're rising without their approval, proving that you were never meant to fit in, you were meant to lead. Number 7, they can't handle the mirror your existence places in front of them. They can't handle you because every time they see you, they are forced to see themselves. Your growth is a mirror, reflecting back to them every dream they abandoned, every risk they were too afraid to take, and every layer of healing they refused to face. You didn't have to say a word. Your consistency, your obedience, your refusal to stay stuck has become a quiet confrontation to the parts of them that have chosen comfort over calling. They see you choosing discipline while they choose excuses, and it bothers them. They see you taking responsibility for your life while they keep blaming everyone else for why they are stuck, and it eats at them. They see you doing the hard work of healing, forgiving, letting go, and growing while they hold on to bitterness like it's a trophy. Your progress exposes the stories they've told themselves about why it's too late, why it's too hard, or why they can't change. Your light exposes their shadows, and that is something they don't know how to handle. They may pretend they're unbothered, but they're watching. They're watching your discipline, your faith, your boldness, your peace, and it stirs something in them they would rather ignore. They try to downplay your growth, gossip about your journey, question your motives, and minimize your wins to keep themselves comfortable, because if they admit you're growing, they have to admit they could have grown too. Your existence becomes a mirror they didn't ask for, and your light becomes the exposure they didn't want. You remind them of the dreams they let die, the boundaries they never set, and the voice they silenced to fit in. It's easier for them to call you too much or doing the most than it is for them to admit they've been living on autopilot while you've been breaking generational cycles. This is why you are dangerous to them now, because you're not trying to prove a point. You're simply living in alignment with who you are, and it forces them to question who they've become. It's not that they hate you, they hate what your growth requires them to see about themselves. You don't need to fight them, just keep growing. Let your existence keep being the mirror that reminds them they could rise too if they're willing to face what your light is exposing. Number 8. You stopped explaining yourself, and that ended their control. They used to drain you by keeping you in constant explanations, twisting your words and making you feel like you owed them a reason for every boundary, every decision, every move you made. They would act confused or offended just to pull you into long, draining conversations where you found yourself over-explaining your heart to people committed to misunderstanding you. It was never about clarity for them. It was about control. The more you explained, the more power they had, watching you dance around your words, trying to prove you were good enough, kind enough, worthy enough, but you stopped. You saw how it was a cycle meant to wear you down, how they used your kindness and empathy against you, how they fed off your need to be understood, so they could keep you explaining and defending yourself instead of living. You realized that no matter how much you explained, it was never going to be enough for people who had already decided who you were in their mind. So you chose silence. You chose peace over being understood. You chose letting your actions speak for you instead of arguing with people who don't listen. And that's what ended their control, because the moment you stopped explaining, they lost access to your energy. They can no longer drain you with accusations, half-truths, or subtle manipulations designed to bait you into defending yourself. Now your silence confuses them. They don't know what you're thinking, and it terrifies them. They don't know how to trigger you because you no longer react to every false narrative they try to push. They don't know how to keep you small because you're no longer asking for permission to live in your truth. You've become untouchable. Not because you fought harder, but because you stopped showing up for battles that drain your spirit. They relied on your need to be seen and understood, but now you've learned that the right people don't need endless explanations to value you. You learned that peace is more important than convincing people who will never see you, and you learned that your silence is a boundary that protects your purpose, and that's why you are more dangerous now than ever before. Number 9, you are dangerous because you move in purpose, not popularity. They thought they could track your moves because they believed you were like them, living for likes, attention, and approval. They thought they could predict your next step because they assumed you would never risk being misunderstood or standing alone. They thought you would follow the crowd, do what's trendy, say what's popular, and compromise your truth to stay in people's good graces. That's how they live, so they expected you to live the same way, but you broke the pattern. You stopped living for the crowd and started moving for the calling. You stopped caring about who clapped and started caring about what God was telling you to do, even if it didn't make sense to others. You stopped showing up where you were tolerated just to keep people comfortable, and you started showing up where you were assigned, even if it meant walking alone. They can't track you anymore because your steps aren't determined by fear, but by purpose. You're not chasing platforms, you're stewarding assignments. You're not posting for applause. You're planting seeds for impact. You're not moving to be seen. You're moving to be obedient. And that's a level of freedom they can't comprehend. You've become unpredictable to them because you're not moved by external validation, and you're not paralyzed by the idea of being alone. They don't understand how you can keep going without a cheerleading squad, how you can keep building without public praise, how you can keep showing up when it feels like no one sees you. They don't get that your fuel comes from a source they can't touch, that your approval comes from God, and that your validation is rooted in your identity, not in their opinions. You're dangerous because they can't bait you with popularity or break you with isolation. You've discovered that sometimes God will separate you to elevate you, and you've learned to be comfortable in seasons of hiddenness while you prepare for what's next. Your obedience has become your compass, and your purpose has become your anchor, making you unstoppable in a world addicted to trends. And that's why they fear you now, because you move differently, and they can't follow where God is leading you. Number 10, they hate you because you became evidence that obedience to God produces unexplainable results. They hate you because your life has become proof that obedience to God is more powerful than any strategy, connection, or manipulation they could ever use. You didn't scheme, gossip, or force your way to where you are. You simply obeyed when God told you to move, to let go, to stay hidden, to forgive, to step out, to speak, to be quiet. They can't stand it because in their world results come from hustling for attention, stepping on others to get ahead and faking images for validation. But here you are, walking in blessings that don't match their logic, and it exposes how powerless their games truly are. They watched you go through seasons where they expected you to crumble, and you didn't. They saw you lose people, positions, and opportunities, and they celebrated quietly, thinking it was the end for you. But what they didn't understand is that your foundation wasn't built on people's approval. It was built on God's promises. So when you started rising again, when doors started opening for you that no one could shut, when resources came from unexpected places, and when favor found you in hidden places, it confused them. Your wins don't make sense to them because they don't know the prayers you prayed, the nights you cried, the sacrifices you made in secret, and the times you obeyed when it made no sense. They don't understand how your peace remains intact, how your joy keeps returning, and how your vision keeps expanding despite the odds against you. They don't get it because their plans rely on controlling outcomes, but your life relies on trusting God with the outcomes. Your obedience has exposed the emptiness of their shortcuts and schemes. It shows that they don't have the power they thought they did, and that terrifies them. Because while they're working overtime to manufacture results, God is producing supernatural results in your life with ease. You became dangerous the moment you surrendered your need to control and chose to trust God instead, because now your life is a testimony they cannot argue with, compete with, or silence. Your very existence has become evidence that God's hand is more powerful than any plan formed against you, and that's why they hate you, even if they can't say it out loud. Number 11, you no longer feed the demons they sent to drain you. They sent chaos into your life, hoping it would break you, distract you, and drain you until you had nothing left. They sent confusion, betrayal, slander, false accusations, and spiritual attacks, thinking it would cause you to self-destruct. They wanted you tangled in drama, stuck in bitterness, constantly defending yourself and wasting your energy on people and battles that were never yours. They wanted you to live in a cycle of spiritual exhaustion, feeding the demons they sent by reacting in anger, fear, and frustration. But you stopped feeding what was sent to drain you. You learned to recognize the distractions for what they were, setups to steal your peace and your focus. You stopped engaging in pointless arguments, stopped explaining yourself to people committed to misunderstanding you, and stopped trying to prove your worth to people who never saw it in the first place. You learned that not every battle requires your response, and not every attack requires your presence. You chose your peace over the urge to clap back, and you chose your purpose over the temptation to prove yourself. The warfare they threw at you didn't destroy you, it refined you. It taught you to discern who was for you and who was against you, who was real and who was only around for what they could take from you. It taught you how to pray deeper, listen closer to God's voice, and move with wisdom rather than emotion. It exposed your vulnerabilities so you could heal them, and it taught you spiritual strategies that made you sharper than ever before. Now you're spiritually unbothered. Their attacks no longer shake you because you see the bigger picture. Their gossip no longer distracts you because you know who you are. Their attempts to provoke you fall flat because you've learned that your silence is stronger than any argument they can start. You stopped feeding the chaos, and in doing so, you starved the demons they sent. That's why you're dangerous now, because they see they can't drain you anymore, and your refusal to react has become your protection. What was meant to break you has only built you, and now you stand sharper, wiser, and unmovable, unshaken by the very warfare they hoped would consume you. Number 12, you became immune to their projections, and that made you unstoppable. They used to control you without even lifting a finger, simply by speaking their opinions over your life. A sarcastic comment here, a dismissive laugh there, a backhanded compliment, a subtle comparison, or a blunt insult disguised as helpful advice. They projected their insecurities, fears, and limitations onto you, and you absorbed it, thinking it was truth. Their words made you question your worth, your calling, and your identity, and you shaped your life around trying to avoid their criticism or earn their approval. They said you were too much, so you started shrinking. They said you weren't enough, so you started overcompensating. They said you were unqualified, so you started doubting your gifts. They said you were hard to love, so you started accepting crumbs, thinking it was all you deserved. Every word they spoke over you was a seed meant to take root in your mind and keep you stuck in cycles of overthinking and insecurity, and for a while it worked. But you woke up. You realized their words were never a reflection of who you are, but a reflection of who they are. You saw how their projections came from their own unhealed wounds, how their limitations were rooted in their fear of becoming who they were meant to be, and how their opinions were based on the smallness they had chosen for themselves. You decided that their words would no longer be the blueprint for your life. You stopped letting their voices be louder than God's voice within you. You stopped filtering your worth through their opinions, and you stopped questioning your path because they couldn't see it. You reclaimed your identity, rooted it in God's truth, and learned to see yourself clearly, separate from their projections. Now their opinions are just noise in the background, powerless to shape your steps. That made you unstoppable. Because once you are no longer controlled by what people think or say, you become dangerous to those who relied on your insecurity to feel superior. Their words can no longer steer your choices, slow your progress, or silence your voice. You walk in clarity now, and that clarity makes their projections irrelevant, exposing how little power they truly have over your life. Number 13. You stopped leaking your anointing for the sake of being liked. They used to love how easily they could access you. Every time they needed comfort, encouragement, prayer, insight, or a fresh word, you were there, pouring out your spirit without hesitation. You were the healer, the listener, the forgiver, the encourager, the one who showed up even when they didn't deserve it. You thought that loving people meant allowing yourself to be drained for them, even when it left you empty, overlooked, and exhausted. You confused being needed with being valued, and you leaked your anointing just to be liked. You were pouring out oil for people who never intended to carry their own weight, who had no plans to grow, and who saw your access as their entitlement. They took your discernment, your prayers, your time, your listening ear, and your spiritual wisdom while offering nothing but drama, gossip, manipulation, and distractions in return. They couldn't carry your spirit, but they were happy to drain it, keeping you busy with their chaos so you would never have the energy to pour into your own calling. Then you woke up. You realized that your anointing is not entertainment, your oil is not for sale, and your spirit is not a playground for people who refuse to grow. You realized that boundaries are not unkind, they are holy. You learned that protecting your peace is protecting your purpose. And you finally understood that Jesus himself didn't give everyone access, and you don't have to either. Now they can't siphon your spiritual oil anymore. They can't distract you with their crises that never end. They can't drain you with conversations that lead nowhere. They can't manipulate you with guilt trips or entitlement. You have set boundaries that guard your oil, and your no has become a gatekeeper for your purpose. They don't like it because your boundaries expose their intentions. They can no longer feed off your spirit without accountability, and your refusal to leak your anointing for approval has made you dangerous to every system that once relied on your exhaustion to stay alive. You've learned that you don't have to trade your calling for company, and now your oil is reserved for where God sends you, not where people demand you. Number 14. You're dangerous because your rise is not fueled by revenge, but by purpose. They expected you to waste your energy trying to prove them wrong, chasing revenge, and focusing on showing them how powerful you are. They thought you would let your anger lead you, that you would be so consumed with getting even that you would miss your true calling. They counted on your pain becoming your identity so they could sit back and watch you exhaust yourself trying to get back at them, never realizing that your rise was never about them in the first place. But you chose purpose over revenge. You felt the betrayal, the mockery, the lies, and the rejection, but you didn't let it become your fuel. You let it refine you, not define you. You learned that revenge is a small game that keeps you tied to people God already freed you from. And you decided you weren't going to let your enemies become the architects of your destiny. You understood that the best revenge is no revenge, just focus, obedience, and unstoppable growth in the direction God has called you. Your rise is rooted in something deeper than proving a point. It is rooted in your calling, your obedience, your faith, your discipline, and your alignment with what God placed inside of you. It is not fueled by bitterness, but by vision. It is not fueled by hate, but by love for your assignment. It is not driven by fear of being forgotten, but by the certainty that you were chosen for a reason and you will complete what God started in you. They are running now because they see you moving in a momentum they can neither match nor block. Your victories are no longer emotional reactions. They are spiritual manifestations of God's promises over your life. Your consistency is terrifying to them because it means they can no longer distract you with their noise. And your progress is steady because it is not tied to whether they clap or criticize. Your victory is inevitable because it is tied to purpose, not revenge. And that's what makes you dangerous. Because when a person is no longer trying to prove themselves, they become unstoppable. You are rising, not for applause, not for payback, but because your purpose demands it, and there is nothing they can do to stop what God has already ordained. They never saw it coming, but your healing, your obedience, your detachment, and your purpose-driven rise became the very things that made you dangerous. They counted on your wounds to keep you weak, your need for approval to keep you small, and your fear of being alone to keep you stuck. They thought you would break under the warfare, that you would lose yourself trying to please them, that you would drain yourself just to belong. But you didn't. You healed what they were using to control you, and it dismantled the illusions they hid behind. You chose silence over explaining yourself, boundaries over leaking your spirit, purpose over revenge, and God's voice over their opinions. You outgrew their tables, stopped feeding their demons, and broke free from their projections, walking in a clarity they can neither match nor manipulate. Your rise is not emotional, it's spiritual. It is not for applause, it is for destiny. It is not for them to understand, it is for you to fulfill. And now they are running, because they can't track you, can't drain you, can't bait you, and can't stop you. You are moving in a momentum led by God Himself. And no scheme, jealousy, slander, or witchcraft can block what has already been sealed over your life. You became untouchable because you stopped living for them and started living for Him. Your victories are inevitable because your purpose is unstoppable. Let them watch. Let them talk. Let them run. You are no longer who they met. You are who God ordained. And your dangerous rise will keep reminding them that nothing they did could ever stop what God planned for you. This is your season to stand, walk, and flourish in the fullness of who you truly are, without apology, without fear, and without limits. If this word lit a fire in your spirit and reminded you of who you really are, don't just keep it to yourself. Hit that subscribe button so you never miss the messages you need to keep you sharp and walking in purpose. Like this video, if you're done letting people drain you, if you're done playing small, and if you're ready to keep rising no matter who can't handle it. Drop a comment below and let me know which part spoke to your spirit the most. I read every single one because this is a community of warriors, not spectators. And if you know someone who needs to hear this, share this video with them right now. Let them be reminded that they are dangerous when they heal, obey, and walk in purpose. We are rising together unapologetically. Let's keep going, chosen ones.